could tell she had that post-vacation glow. Had to get that on the record. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 17th special meeting of the General Government Committee. Thanks, everyone, for allowing us to push this. Typically, we meet last Wednesday, but we're meeting today instead. So we'll go ahead. The time is 8 a.m. We'll go ahead and get started. Call to order. For roll call, all three council members are present and accounted for. Councilmember Joan Cathy, Councilmember Leanna Dahlhoff, myself, Councilmember Michael Althauser. First order of business, as always, is approval of the meeting minutes from our prior meeting, which took place on June 12th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Dahlhoff and seconded by Councilmember Cathy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. So we have two substantive items on our agenda, both relating to our 2025 comp plan periodic update. I think the first one is the climate element. Brad, I think you and Erica are going to help us walk through that one.
Yeah, really the intent of this is to make sure if there were any outstanding questions from the council from the joint work session earlier this month, that there's enough time for you to ask those questions. I was actually a little bit surprised that the council didn't have as many questions as I anticipated at the last meeting, but I just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to ask any questions of us or offer any observations that we should be paying attention to based on what you talked with the planning commission about.
I just want to say that I appreciate Lietta's comments, and as I read through that and I saw what she had written, I'm like, yeah, me too. So I basically would put my initials beside hers on each one of those. And I thought they were excellent, Lietta, and asking, you know, what it meant, our use of words, you know, allowing permission before there was even a rule, or the words, you know, stronger. So that's my comment. Really, I don't see why for me to pick around at anything else.
So just as a reminder, there's the in-person open house for the climate element again will be August 14th from 7 until 9. It'll be at the Oshawa Cultural Community Center, and there will also be an online component that will be starting the next day through the end of September. So similar to what we did for the housing element, the same kind of format that we'll be doing for the climate side. We'll probably be seeing some deliverables fairly quickly from the climate element as well. We have some meetings set up for you this fall for that. We're also in the process of drafting the elements right now. We've got the conservation element started. We've got a lot of updates to do to it, but I think we're going to be in fairly good shape for the fall for you to start to actually dive into the full text of what we're looking at.
Very good. Would you say that date one more time?
It's August 14th from 7 until 9.
Okay.
For outreach for that, to try to drum up attendance and community input, are we reaching out to some of the different advocacy organizations in the county, like Thurston Environmental Advocates, and there's a few other local based ones, Land Conservancy, like?
Yes, we're definitely doing that. The stakeholder group that was identified specifically for the climate element as well is playing an important role in that, and they cover a pretty broad base as well. In addition to that, obviously we've got our social media, and we'll be getting our website in shape today to update to handle that as well.
Great. Leanna, I don't know if you have any additional comments beyond what you sent in writing, or if you want to make any remarks about that.
I guess the only thing is I appreciate, and there's been multiple discussions about it, like the word choices, action oriented, not passive. And so I appreciate that theme. And I think, you know, my natural disposition is the push. And so I don't want to push too far, but I'm gonna push as far as I can until Brad says, knock it off, Leetta. But if we're gonna do certain things and the tone and the consistency, right, and how all the pieces play together. So that's why I made some comments of the word choices of why would we allow something when it doesn't line up? So having those future discussions, however it turns out, I appreciate.
Mhm.
I think that's what I was trying to say as I read that. It sounded like we used language that people had a choice, yet we're saying this is what the city says we need to do for, you know, not whizzing into the wetlands or something. And we're saying, you know, try to work hard not to do that. And I think that those were kind of the same word choices that Leetta and I were looking at. So overall, I think it's great work, my goodness, and it's quite different than I remember looking at that over the years. So thanks, Brad, and your team. I think it's good. And if it gets a little stronger, like we're talking about, then you know.
I like the direction. I think you're also picking up historical pieces, right, of how we used to talk. And we're reframing that and being more active and being more intentional of what we do want to see for our future. So these are good catches.
Mhm. I think some of those catches also, or some of those changes that both of us are talking about, also reflect, you know, climate change, where we're headed, what we're doing. I think that, and what we need to do, and how we need to treat our climate and, you know, our development and our land use and everything in different ways. So I expected to want to say more, but I felt like you got out ahead of that, quite a bit of that, Brad. So
Yeah, it's been very handy the planning commission has been very active in helping us frame a lot of this stuff. And so we definitely will be continuing to use them as a sounding board for a lot of the stuff. I think our biggest issue will be transitioning to implementation actions.
yeah,
And identifying specific things. There are things that are going to be sort of ongoing. Always make sure the regulations, you know, reflect current guidance and that kind of thing. But identifying specific one-time actions will be, I think, another important component that we're working on.
yeah. What did you think of it, Michael?
I agree with everything that's been said. I agree too, Brad, that like the actions are really sort of where the meat is moving forward. And to the degree that we're like creating a plan that outlines what that looks like, that's very exciting. I mean, the same thing with like the climate action plan is like, it's exciting to have a framework. And then it's like even more both daunting as well as exciting to see like what actually is involved with implementing it. The real questions that I had were more about the public utilities and facilities one, which we'll talk about next, but I didn't have a lot of other questions or comments about the climate element.
Okay. Well, I know Eric.
It's also good to see that we've woven climate into a bunch of the other elements too, because it touches all things. It's not like we have this standalone climate element, which is, I think, a point you made, Brad, a couple years ago when the bill to require this failed, was that climate is a component of housing, climate is a component of transportation, climate is a component of every other element in the comp plan, and it needs to be represented in those elements in addition to being a standalone element. And so far in our briefings of the different elements, I think we've been able to cover that in various ways, which is, I think, a good thing.
All right. Well, I think that probably covers for this topic. Eric, I know, is waiting eagerly in the wings to start discussion of the public facilities side of things. So.
Brad, on my part, would you pass on to the Planning Commission how much we appreciate the work they've done? It made it easier for us to, you know, add to and in our minds, you know, strengthen a bit. But the structure that was there. I appreciate their work on that.
I will definitely do that.
Great. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the next element we'll be discussing this morning. Morning,
All
Erica.
right. Yeah, good morning. So I would like to announce that this is the first public meeting that we've had on these two elements, specifically the lands for public purposes and utilities. We are flexible right now, so I'm going to ask you guys if you would like me to go through each of the elements with you with the goals and policies, or if you wanted to have more of like an open discussion, because we haven't been able to present these to the Planning Commission yet and haven't received their comments.
I personally, I think it makes sense to go through the various goals and strategies, just because since we haven't had a meeting on them before, if there is, members of the public who are watching who might be unfamiliar, they might appreciate us kind of going through that to understand the scope and the gist of what we're talking about for it. I don't know if other council members have strong feelings one way or the other, though.
I just can't believe anybody'd get up at 8 o'clock.
I was like, who's watching right now?
We're recording. People who
Who's
watch
watching?
Oh, okay. Really? Yeah.
I happen to know for a fact that several gentlemen, including Dave McAndry, sometimes stream these meetings while at the Valley.
While where?
At the Valley, at the gym at the Valley.
Oh. Yeah. He's hard up for entertainment while he exercises.
Yeah.
If that's what he's doing, I don't know. He's certainly not playing tennis and listening to the.
All right, so it sounds like we kind of just want to go through the goals and policies together. They are fairly short, so they're not super long in length, and then we can kind of discuss, and I'll take comments from you guys if you have any. Sorry, I apologize. Take comments from you if you have any.
No need to apologize, Erica. Just go painfully slow for us, though.
So I do see the lands for public purposes element. Do you guys see that as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. So the element only has 2 goals here. Provide necessary and efficient services to Tumwater and its urban growth area. In the column next to the language there, we have our staff notes, so no changes were proposed. And then the columns after that were the current or the 2016 version of the goals and policies. Fairly straightforward. We didn't make many changes except for the policy 1.3. We modified it for an implementation action number 7 from the land use element. So we took that item from the land use element and incorporated it into this element, which is direct the timing and location of development with the provision of adequate facilities and services within Tumwater's urban growth area through the periodic update to the Tumwater and Thurston County Joint Plan and Regulations. This is to replace, follow the requirements of the countywide planning policy when citing new facilities and improve the process whenever possible. Then our second goal, support improvement in the provision of public services. We changed the language on that to be more action oriented, which is a common theme within the comprehensive plan update. And then we are doing the work with the regional partners to expand and improve Tumwater's multimodal transit network in conjunction with the transportation plan. This was modified to be more action-oriented as well. Then we have our policy 2.2, improve waste management services and decrease waste production in the city with an action item, promote reuse, composting, and recycling to minimize solid waste production in the city. This is a state requirement as part of House Bill 1799. I have contacted some composting facilities around the area, not specifically within the city of Tumwater, but I have asked for comment to talk about or ask if they have any plans for expanding services, specifically within Thurston County and the city of Tumwater to citizens, and asking how we could potentially support that.
Can I just make a comment here about, I mentioned it last night at council. Are you wanting to, not this part, but the composting, are we wanting to do more composting than is offered by our regular opportunity for composting in our pickups that we have now, our garbage haulers?
Right now, we want to ensure that we add it to our definition of essential facilities or public facilities and make sure that it's allowed in our zoning, so that if they did want to expand services or have services within the city that they're allowed to, or that we have allowed zoning for that use.
Anyone can have a compost bin who has trash pickup. So that part would be covered if we wanted to encourage somehow for people to take that. And then some cities do their composting are requirements, and it's paid for. It's within their bill for their regular garbage pickup. So I'm not exactly sure, but the composting yard waste type of collection in our city and in our county has increased. You know, since they've been pushing this, and we have the bins for it. You know, people were used to putting in yard waste, and now they can put the compost with it.
Isn't part of this, Joan, that for composting is allowing and zoning people to have personal compost bins on their property?
They can do that.
They can now, because we did an ordinance that says they can. And that's part of what 1799 is, though, I think, is it's also looking at, like, so there are a lot of cities who ban personal composting. I think,
okay.
I don't know, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a component of 1799, right?
I would have to review and then get back to you, but I can definitely make some notes to look into that more to see if we want to implement a policy or action item to specifically spell out, promote more of the personal composting or residential composting, and not so much as citing it as a facility or services.
Yeah, I mean, people probably, like Michael's saying, may not know it. And when we were briefed at SWAC about, you know, what was in the legislature for this session and so forth, this past one, they mentioned that they were trying to encourage people to do their own composting and use it in their own yards or whatever. So I thought that's what this was about.
It is also part of the review to look forward to the next 20 years. So to make sure that we do meet with our waste management services to talk about expansion, talk about maybe new programs that they might be offering, and then how we're going to deal with the 10 to 12,000 people and the expansion within the city. So it's just to make sure also that we're talking with them to talk about planning, siting facilities going forward. But these are great comments, and I will get back to you guys with that and look into adding some more action items. It's great feedback, so thank you.
One question I had about this, and I think the answer is that it's covered in different elements, but it sort of fits in the theme of composting and reducing utilization of other city management services. is through like the use of rain barrels. Like there's county programs that even in Tumwater we have access to. I think we could get like $25 rebates for rain barrels as the city's program or something like that. Is that because you're reducing the reliability on the utility of the water service? Does that mean that it makes sense to mention that as a strategy in the utility element, or is that covered in our sustainability and other elements, more specifically pertaining to water?
That is a good question.
Now, I don't know how we're encouraging people to do that, but Michael, I think that's great to bring that up because I remember a discussion some years back about rain barrels and their use and how to use them, and then there have been those workshops at Yager Park regularly. They're a little bit more sporadic now, but yeah, there and the county encourages that also.
Yeah, we do it. I think we incentivize it through a rebate. The city offers a $60 rebate for rain barrels, so we financially incentivize it a little bit to that extent. Though the maximum is $60 for the rain barrels. I think Olympia has a higher range. Theirs is like 100 or something, if I recall. So we incentivize it through that. It's part of like our water conservation program where like we have rebates for high efficiency toilets, rebates for high efficiency washing machines, and for irrigation that's based on weather. So you're not watering when it's raining and stuff, and you're saving more water when it's dry. So it's part of our suite of different programs, but they're probably covered under the climate element. But I just wasn't sure if it also makes sense for it to be here since water is one of the primary utilities that we provide as well.
Yeah, I would say probably not in the lands for public purposes, but more like you had mentioned in the utilities element. I did send these goals and policies to our water resources division, and I need to follow up with them. I did give them a deadline to get comments back to me so that we could start working on our revised draft of the goals and policies. I will follow up and we'll take a look at state requirements and then see if we can incorporate that or mention that once we look through the utilities element.
Michael is using the plural of the word barrels, and I think that when we did it long time back, not long time, but back, I think people had a question of how many did they have to have to get a rebate? Is it one? Is it two? And do you remember, Michael?
Yeah, for Tumwater, it's $10 a barrel up to a maximum of $60 in 6 barrels.
Okay.
That's what our application says. I just pulled it up on my iPad here.
So it's not filling your barrel 6 times during the season.
No, it's for the procurement of the barrel,
Okay.
which will hopefully last more than, many seasons.
Yes, yeah, many seasons, yeah.
Yeah. Like 10, I mean, you can get a barrel for like $25 or $30. So if you think of it that way, if you go with a standard kind of $50 blue barrel, it's a third of the price ish, depending on how much you pay.
Mm-hmm. How fancy you want to get collecting your water.
Yeah.
That's great. So we'll move on. We're almost done with the lands for public purposes. And then we'll go into the utilities. Our next policy is going to be 2.3, work with the Tumwater and Olympia school districts to site facilities that accommodate changing student populations. We did meet with the school district when we were doing our housing stakeholder outreach, and we talked a little bit about housing and students and classroom sizes and the needs for future facilities. So I do need to look through my notes and follow up with the school districts, at least Tumwater. We met with the Tumwater School District and kind of go over this policy item and talk about future growth within the next 20 years, not specific to housing, and see if there's any action items that we can incorporate into this as well. We did.
I have a question about these and specifically, so there's different state law defines essential public facilities as including a variety of things, anything from like schools to so certain types of mental health facilities and certain types of juvenile justice correctional facilities, like community facilities by DCYF. Is this where, like, school districts are essential public facilities under state law, but there's other essential public facilities that aren't mentioned in our strategies, like community facilities and like foster care group homes are not mentioned in here. Does it make sense to have a component in here that says that we'll work on citing for essential public facilities? Because I think the state law says that our comp plan has to provide for citing of essential public facilities, right?
Yeah. So actually there's about 3 different parts to that question. First of all, the state definition of essential public facilities as we have to provide in the comprehensive plan, as you mentioned, address a lot of the uses that everybody needs that nobody wants near them.
Yeah.
Like jails and drug treatment facilities. And in the case of education, a large university. School facilities themselves, like the public schools on the K through 12, don't reach that level of being an essential public facility, thankfully. Which means that the process for approving them is simpler than what we would have to go through for essential public facility. We're really trying to figure out the best place to put the state required essential public facility component. In my mind, it seems to belong more in the land use component because it is a land use that we're dealing with here. But we do have language currently in this particular element that deals with that. So I think when we get to the discussion of land use in a little more detail on the policies, we've actually drafted a number of policies dealing with those particular items. In terms of the schools issue on the K through 12 for Olympia and the Tumwater School District, we're trying to look at processes that make it simpler to go through the permitting process to cite a school. Well, at the same time, if there are external things in the neighborhoods and so forth, we're also dealing with that as part of the permitting process. So the other items that you mentioned that state law requires us to allow for, and that includes things like, say, group homes or childcare facilities or other specific uses like that. I think we've covered that fairly well in the zoning code as it is right now, meaning that they're allowed in almost every zone that we allow for commercial or residential uses. And I don't know if we really need to do very much more to meet meet the intent of the state law, and also at the same time make sure we have enough places for all those kinds of facilities to locate.
Okay. For the school district one, is the school district anticipating the need to open a new school anytime soon? Like Olympia's been having conversations about closures. Yeah. Seems like a lot of districts across the state are. What's the vibe from TSD?
Yeah, we, as Erica mentioned, we met with Mel Murray, who's their facilities manager there, and who's involved obviously in construction of new schools and everything. He said they're still anticipating the need for additional facilities, especially within the 20-year timeframe. Number one, because our population is growing, and our composition of our households is different from Olympia. We have more families, more children, and so forth than Olympia does. So he says it's actually kind of interesting just looking at the differences across the 3 big school districts in the county, how different things are. And he doesn't have an easy answer for why Olympia is struggling far more than we are in terms of the school district population and so forth. That's the other reason why we sort of redrafted the policy to reflect potential ups or downs in the school district rather than just always assuming we're going to be needing brand new facilities. So we want a little more flexibility that way. But based on our conversations, they're still looking at plans for expansion and how to handle that.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment, since we're just finished talking about climate and all of that kind of thing. I read an article about schools and the types of, this is what you're saying, what Brad's saying about the, different cities have different things, but the ones that anticipate building a high school, they're concerned about the environment in terms of how many kids are driving cars. And so and making, larger parking lots or things like that. And so they're thinking about some of this in terms of climate change and maybe using it as a, teaching tool or something. And first time I read it, I thought, oh, I can't see a lot of these high school kids jumping on a bus if you have bus service or something, but they're exploring that, and I think it's a good thing to, as far as wanting to cut down on cars and different modes of transportation. So I don't know if our school district is thinking of the high school level they're going to need a new school, or I mean, even if they don't, just that as a teaching tool for high school students. And so if they're going to build something, I'd like them to think about that. Not that it's our place to tell the school district what to think about, but as far as land use, and if you didn't have to pave over as much for parking lots, that would be good. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
All right. Then we have policy 2.4, support technological advancements to improve city services. We modified the language for that, made it a little more active. And then we have policy 1.3, which was moved over, that we saw earlier in the presentation from the land use element, which is directing the timing and location of the development with the provision of adequate facilities and services within Tumwater's urban growth area through updates and Tumwater and Thurston County Joint Plan regulations. So we got some really good feedback. I really appreciate it. And I have some things to look into as far as the lands for public purposes element goes. Did we have any other thoughts or questions regarding the element? Definitely we'll look into adding some actions for these policies. No. Okay, you can always email me or Brad with comments or questions, any follow-up after the fact. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and then we're going to go to the utilities element. All right. Starting with goal 1 of the utilities element, increase efficiency when planning for and siting utilities. We didn't change any language for this and we kept goal 1 as goal 1. Policy action.
Erica, are you sharing something?
We can't see your screen if you're sharing.
I mean, I'm imagining what
There
you're
we
reading
go.
right now.
There we go. Sorry. 8 o'clock, All right. Goal 1, increase efficiency when planning for and siting utilities. We didn't change any language to that and we kept that as number 1. Policy 1.1, we didn't change. any language, and that's communicate with private utility companies when citing utilities to discuss anticipated growth projections and how to size utilities appropriately to meet anticipated demand. We have an action item there. Cooperate and participate with Puget Sound Energy in the formulation of policy and development of an underground management plan with respect to Puget Sound's aerial facilities within the city of Tumwater. We do have a meeting with Puget Sound Energy tomorrow to go over their plans, services, utilities for the next 20 years in population increase. So there will potentially be more action items after our discussion with them tomorrow. We are meeting at City Hall. They do have a few ideas for different energy sources. So it's just going to be a chance for us to kind of talk about what their plans are, or what they have going on. And then we have policy 1.2, be aware of public service obligations when local review of utility improvements occurs. And then we have policy 1.3, utilize transportation right away for utility corridors whenever feasible. We have a comment there that there may be an opportunity for implementation action to support Puget Sound Energy's pole charging program, where they attach electric vehicle charging to EV chargers to existing utility and light poles for adjacent parking and charging. We're probably going to talk about that tomorrow to see if that's relevant or an action item to include in the plan. We did reach out to other, since we're talking about service providers, I did reach out to other service providers. I haven't had much luck contacting them, so I do need to follow up with them, like Xfinity for cable services, cell phone services. And we also should probably talk with Lot. I have been emailing back and forth with Lot, but I do need to follow up with them and potentially talk about utilities through Lot. Policy 1.4, provide timely notification to all affected utilities prior to road construction. Policy 1.5, approve utility permits when the project to be served is permitted whenever feasible and as quickly as possible. We are looking at reviewing the state permitting requirements to ensure timely processing of permits. Coordinate with neighboring jurisdictions to ensure consistency of the respective utility plans to facilitate orderly utility service. Slightly modified. A lot of this is updating language to make it more action oriented. And then we have goal 2, support energy generation from renewable resources to bring the region to net zero emissions by 2050. We do have the staff note here. It is modified. The city does not generate energy for the community except in a limited way for its own facilities. So that is why we have the action or the words or language to support energy generation. And then we provide incentives to support the installation of distributed electrical generation equipment, such as our rooftop solar panels, which we all know we have a wonderful program for that. So action item 2.1.1. Encourage developers and homeowners to take advantage of our existing national, local, and utility incentive programs. This is somewhere where we could also incorporate a language about our Solar Star program. So if there's any thoughts or questions about maybe implementing that into our plan as an action item. Then we have policy 2.2, support large-scale multi-jurisdictional renewable energy projects. So like large-scale solar arrays, wind energy. We were so supporting that. Policy 2.3, Maintain uniform building codes and permitting practices to make the installation of solar panels or other distributed generation technologies easier and faster. And then goal 3, support enhancement of the region's electricity distribution, monitoring, and storage infrastructure to support cleaner technologies and practices. So we do not create energy or store energy for the community except for on a limited basis for our own facilities. But potentially talking with energy providers, we would talk about facilities where storage could be stored. And then policy 3.1, monitor system or grid scale energy storage innovations and use experiences of communities that begin to deploy them to inform city codes and permitting. Support energy suppliers, equipment upgrades, innovative programs and service offerings related to adding information technology to the system or grid, and collaborate with energy providers to assess innovative system scale, grid scale energy storage solutions in controlled conditions. And then we're supporting adding vehicle chargers to homes, businesses, and public parking infrastructure. We do have a question for staff. Does this language work considering we have state requirements now for certain types of buildings? So we did update our building energy code, and there are requirements for infrastructure for EV charging now with residential development and commercial development. So this is something to consider. Do we want to put that into the plan and outline that in the plan, or should we maybe mention the building code?
There isn't a permit process for that, is there? Like, you don't need a permit for a vehicle charger. Correct?
Oh, sorry, I'm still fairly new, so learning the permitting systems here, but probably an electrical permit per Brad.
Okay.
Like, so you're asking if an existing residence wants to install a charger?
Yeah, like if a homeowner buys an electric car and they install a charger, do they need a permit to do that? Or can they just hire some electrician and then the electrician who's licensed comes out and installs it? Like, cause if you need a permit for it, I wonder if the language on this would be modified to, like, some of these other ones that are regarding permits, the action item sort of seems to be a little bit different in terms of making the permit process smooth and simple and fast. And it seems like if this does require a permit, that instead of support adding, that it could be focused on making the permitting easy, because that would be a method of supporting it.
Yeah, I do believe electrical is done through the state.
Yeah, I think just, this is a fairly broad one, so, you know, say for example, somebody adds a charging to their home use that may be able to run off the current power and so forth, they wouldn't need a permit, but a larger facility that's trying to do multiples, then I would assume they would have to obviously go through electrical permit review for that, which is handled by the state. But we could modify this to sort of cover broadly that we're, you know, ensure that the permitting process is straightforward for any type of addition like this.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Right, just taking some notes. So moving on to 3.5, policy 3.5, promote equitable integration of electric vehicle infrastructure into new and existing facilities, including allowances and zoning regulations for charging stations and locations where they are needed. Question for staff, should an implementation action for this eliminate the need to include allowances? Then we have policy 3.6, support.
Can you explain what that means? What do you mean in terms of allowances in this context?
Actually, we're not sure. That's just, it's a comment from our, from Melissa that we need to clarify a little bit further about what that means in this context.
Okay.
I guess along with that, what does equitable mean when most people who are low income can't afford an electric vehicle? So what are we talking about with equitable? If it's
Actually,
not like,
that brings up a lot of questions, and also how we actually, we can provide for things and we can support things, and that's actually an excellent question, and I don't have an easy answer to that one. But what we might want to do is think through some potential implementation actions to support expansion of that to other income groups, and it's also a question of, can you afford a vehicle, whether it's electric or something else, and how that works in. So maybe we think along those lines.
right. And I guess that leads into a larger question of there's a lot of support. But when I read it, I can change the definition of support for each one. So I'm confusing myself. I don't know what support means because it's used so much in different ways.
And I think that's where I think in terms of the policy language, I think support is probably appropriate, but I think when we get to the implementation side of things, that's when we start to define what support looks like in that particular context.
Got it.
Could I make a comment back on the other one where we were talking about permitting? I think it's really important for us to be clear about that, what that would be for, because we could discourage people from what we want them to, change to, or to have electric cars or so forth. And as soon as you say permitting, people groan about the city process or the cost of getting a permit. So wherever we're using permitting, like in that situation, just make sure our language is clear.
Can I add to that with Joan regarding like timeliness as well, efficiencies, effectiveness? Because my example is solar panels, right? You had to do a PSC inspection, an LNI inspection, and a City of Tumwater inspection. And the City of Tumwater inspection for mine took over 3 months. So the timeliness as well, like it could be streamlined, but if you have to wait months and months and months, that's also super frustrating.
Yeah, permit makes people prickly. And then if you have to wait. How'd you feel when they finally got there, Leah?
Well, it was November, so I wasn't really generating that much.
Okay.
So it was even more prickly.
Great feedback. Thank you. I'm just taking some notes real quick. Okay. I believe we are on policy 3.6, support local projects to increase the existing electrical vehicle fleet. No changes proposed. I do believe we are working on this through the green team. We have a green team and working on electrifying our fleet, excuse me, is what I should say. So no changes proposed. And then 3.7, support a change in state policies to increase the utility share of funding for undergrounding of overhead wires to reduce power outages. We also implemented this in our natural hazard mitigation plan. So new utilities should be installed underground. And then we have policy 3.8, protect and reserve existing electrical transmission corridors to maintain their usefulness and meeting future needs. Coordinate with the natural hazards mitigation plan to reduce service interruptions and provide services that are more dependable during hazard events or storm events. Support increase. A lot of these are energy related so far. As far as our goals go, support increasing energy efficiency and conservation to reduce the region's carbon footprint. support incentives for decarbonized green buildings, partner with Puget Sound Energy and other utility providers to promote energy efficiency programs and initiatives, and expedite permitting processes related to energy efficient upgrades. Electrify the city vehicle fleet to the greatest extent possible and adopt policies that require properties to undertake an energy audit at the time of sale or during substantial remodel, including if deficiencies are found. Then we have Goal 5, ensure vital utilities are created, operated, and maintained in a safe manner. We have undergrounding utilities to increase public safety.
Eric, can I make a comment about that one?
Yeah.
The one thing I think in my notes that I sent to Brad is the unintended consequences. Like the example is putting the electrical lines underground at a manufactured home park. That then those costs will then go to the seniors and their rents will go up, right? So what does it look like to manage and address unintended consequences of the locations, and who is I don't know, not receiving the burden, but like absorbing those costs if it's where nearby affordable housing or manufactured home parks or things like that.
Thank you. An action item to supplement this policy is work with neighborhood associations to encourage the development of local improvement districts to provide funding for undergrounding existing utilities. And then we have policy 5.2, encourage pipeline safety through the public awareness and regulations. No changes were proposed to that. And then we have action item 5.2.1, adopt regulations that limit high-risk uses near pipelines to protect both the public and the pipelines themselves. And then support education to the public on pipeline safety and pipeline locations within the city. I have not heard back. I have emailed pipeline providers, like, yes, I've reached out to them and I haven't heard back from them. So we haven't really changed much, but modified the language for these action items. So this is the first time that these policies and goals are being reviewed. So it is a rough draft. So I really appreciate the conversations. Maybe looking at what could be added, what could be changed, taken out. We will be presenting these again in November. We have a planning commission work session on November 12th, and then we have a general government committee briefing on the 13th of November.
Will you be back from vacations by then, Lieta?
I'm actually going to be going on another vacation in November, so I will make it work.
Well, we could reschedule now.
I'll make it work.
All right, well, thank you. I do, like I said, appreciate the comments. This is a rough draft. There's going to be some more fine tuning. We're still meeting with stakeholders and talking with other departments. So this is grassroots right now. So we'll definitely be making some changes. And yes, if you guys have comments, questions, you can edit the tables and either email them to Brad or I, and we will get back to you guys with those questions and comments.
Erica, I appreciate that when we ask questions, you don't, anyway, for myself, it doesn't make me feel like I'm silly or picky or, you know, whatever. You're very gracious about, well, I don't know that, or I'll put that in a note. Thank you. So thanks for this.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm learning too, and this is my first comprehensive plan update, so I appreciate your guys' patience with me, and yeah, it's just an opportunity to grow and learn more.
It's a lot of work.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you very much for the briefings. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, 5 minutes before 9. So thanks everyone for the discussion. Thank you staff for the briefings today and for accommodating the request for a special meeting in lieu of last week. And that brings us to the end. We are adjourned. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.